Are you interested on what's going on underneath the soil in your truffle orchard? Today I'm going to teach you how to sample soil and root tips from your truffle orchard so you can further analyze them and see if they have tuber mycorrhizae. You're going to need a few specific supplies for this, and those are a digging implement. You can use a small sharpened shovel, a trowel, or a soil knife. You want to make sure these are very sharp so you can cut through root tips well. You'll want to use alcohol spray and a paper towel or a rag to clean the implement between each sampling tree. You're going to want a vessel to collect the material in. That can be a bucket or a gallon-sized plastic bag. You'll want a clear labeling system. That can be Sharpies and paper tags or a flagging tape that you tie around your bucket handle so you know which tree your sample came from. You can also optionally use a meter stick to measure the distance from each tree that your sample is, so you can make sure that's consistent throughout the sampling process. We'll want to determine how many samples we want to take from our orchard and where we'll sample those from. A good rule to follow is sampling between 1% and 3% of the trees in your orchard. If this turns out to be too large, you can aim for sampling at least 3 to 5 trees. You want to sample from meaningful sections in your orchard as well. If your orchard was planted in 2 separate years, or you have one area on a flat level and one area on a slope, or perhaps 2 different soil types in your orchard, you'll want to sample from all the different areas in it. You also want to make sure that you sample healthy-looking trees. Don't sample from disease-looking trees or areas that may be poor-looking soil or have terrible drainage. Determine the most average-looking trees in your orchard and sample from those. Sample from your truffle orchard during its active growing season. This is usually late spring to early fall. Once the trees start leafing out, that's a good indication that you can start sampling. This is because the tree roots are actively growing in the soil and making associations with the truffle mycorrhizae. Sample from your orchard during normal, mild weather patterns. If there's a big rain event, you want to wait 2 to 3 days before you sample from your orchard so the soil is not saturated. If you're in the middle of a drought, you want to irrigate your orchard and wait 2 to 3 days before you sample so the soil is not too dry. We want to aim for moderately moist soil so that our sample isn't too saturated or too dry. When collecting soil samples from your orchard, you can use a couple different indicators as to where to take your soil sample from. If brulee is present in your orchard, you can take from the edge of your brulee. You can also use the tree canopy drip line as an indicator of where you might sample from. In the case of this orchard, where the canopy is fully enclosed, we're going to use a meter stick to measure out distance as to where we'll take our sample. We want to measure between 3 to 4 feet from the base of the tree. And we want to use our trowel or soil knife. We also want to make sure that each of these tools is clean before we use it. So we're going to use alcohol spray and the cloth to wipe these off. This is so each sample is not contaminated from the prior sample. You want to take a few samples around each tree so you can represent the tree fully. I do this by taking samples from the north, east, south, and west side of the tree. Take a sample that's roughly 3 to 4 inches deep and about 6 inches across. I want to use a sharp soil knife or trowel when I take these samples, and I want to make sure I move that trowel all the way around the hole so that I'm severing all of the roots in my soil sample. If I don't do this, some tree roots may not be severed from the tree and will remain behind when I move the soil sample into the bucket. Once I've collected my soil from multiple parts around the tree, I want to thoroughly mix those samples together, ensure that I have tree roots, and then clearly label each sample. I use a number and lettering system in this orchard to indicate where trees are. So I've just sampled from the 4th tree in row F, so I will label this tree 4F and securely attach this label to my bucket. Include the date on your sample label. When sampling with a bucket, you want to ensure that either your bucket is completely cleaned between each sample with alcohol spray and there is no residue left behind, or use a separate bucket for each sample. Alternatively, you can use a Ziploc bag to collect all of these samples and not have to worry about cleaning your bucket. It may be a good idea to flag each tree that you've sampled from so you know exactly where your samples came from. You can use flagging tape and write down the corresponding sample number. If you're sending the soil in for lab analysis, you can separate out about a quart-sized plastic bag worth, label it clearly, and follow the instructions for submitting it, which can be found on the website located at the end of this video. If you're sending your soil sample in for further analysis, you'll also want to take a negative control sample from outside your orchard. Take this in a grassy area that's at least 60 feet away from your orchard edge. We'll use this as a reference to measure the mycelial content of tuber in your orchard. Please visit us at go.ncsu.edu/truffle lab for more information.